Here's what you're missing over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we are talking about this book right here, Searching for George Gordon Meade. I didn't know he was missing. Did you know he was missing?
He was forgotten.
He was forgotten. That's what we're searching for. The memory of George Gordon Meade, the Forgotten Victor of Gettysburg. We talk about this a lot on the show, and I think, in recent years, we've all been delighted to see that Meade is getting, you could say, a new look, or maybe a first fair look, first honest look, by a lot of historians. This book, what year did this book come out?
It came out in 2013 for the 150th anniversary.
Okay, so this has been out, what, 11 years now?
Yeah, 11 years.
I know, went fast.
Yeah.
And this was probably an early exploration of Meade or consideration of Meade, right?
It was. Yeah. I like to take at least a little credit for maybe starting to push his reputation into the favorable territory.
Yeah, good. And now, our friend Jen Murray has been working on a book about Meade, and I was talking to her about it not too long ago, and she's doing it for a university press, so it's going to be, she's got almost 1,000 pages, but it's going to be shrunk down to like 12. so which is unfortunate because I'm sure it's a lot of really interesting stuff that she got there. But the point I'm trying to make is people are looking at Meade in a good way. I think they're giving him another chance and perhaps rehabilitating him, or even just acknowledging him in the first place. And this one here is an interesting one. Tom Huntington is the author. He's been on the show before. He's on now for his second time, I believe.
That is correct.
First time in the new studio. Tom, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And beautiful studio.
Thank you. That's courtesy of Eric Dorr over at the Gettysburg Museum of History next door. Ah. He bought the building, and he's like, "You want a studio?
Yeah.
Here you go." So this book here, I read the introduction. It's an interesting. There's a couple of things that so the introduction, the scene is you're at a reenactment.
Right.
What year was that? Do you remember?
I'm thinking that was probably 2011.
Okay. So you're walking around, and was it out? What was it? Pumping? Not pumping.
Boy.
Shit, what the hell's the name of the road?
It was out in the outskirts someplace.
Yes. North of town.
Yeah.
Okay. That's like a solar farm now?
Is it?
Yeah, isn't that a shame?
Yeah.
But anyway, you're out there, and there's a couple of lines that I really liked here. You're talking about the reenactment, the battle begins, there's the spectators in the stands, and there's, you're setting the scene there. And you refer to a reenactment as a homeopathic taste of war.
Yeah.
I really like that. That's pretty good. And then also, you say it's both silly and noble. Something both silly and noble about this reenactment, which I agree with that as well. I always kind of thought it was silly to dress up and pretend to be men killing each other,
right? And
people applaud.
Yes, and in the modern day is always intruding one way or the other.
Yes. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. And you mentioned guys sitting on his cot in his tent with his cell phone to his ear, or the sound of a generator behind a stack of hay bales.
And the porta potties.
Yeah, and the porta potties, right. But you, were you ever a reenactor?
I never was, no.
Okay, I wasn't either. But I did like to go to them when I was younger. But the older I got, the more I did start to notice the silliness of the whole idea. And I mean, the Romans did it. They, in the Colosseum, they would reenact battles and stuff. So, I mean, it's not a new thing, and it's certainly not a uniquely American thing. I think, of course, like with everything else, we kind of took it to the nth degree. But I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily.
Oh, absolutely not.
A lot of us, and I'm not saying you were saying that, but a lot of us who got into history probably really, before even the movie, I think I can remember going to reenactments and kind of my interest being solidified by that. Like, going around the camps and seeing the muskets laying out, and, some guy would let you hold it and you feel how heavy it is. And of course, to an 8-year-old, those things are Really heavy.
And you're never going to see a Civil War army on the march. You're never going to see 100,000 men in uniforms marching down a dusty road.
Right.
That's why I call it like a homeopathic taste of war. It's just a little drop of the real thing. But you can use your imagination and perhaps fill that out and get a sense of kind of what it was like.
Yeah. And I think that's the idea of it is like,
absolutely.
Here's a snapshot, perhaps, a depiction of it, but use your imagination to figure out the rest.
Yeah.
And most people don't have that good of imagination. But you're talking about going around the reenactment, all the different things that you're seeing. And then there is a point where you go into a tent and the Confederate generals are there, or the living historians portraying them. And then later on, you notice that, of all the Union generals you're seeing, you're not seeing Meade.
Meade was not there at that point.
Right.
Yeah, he was missing.
But later on he shows up.
Yeah.
And you talk to him and you point out that he was, probably a little more, a little friendlier than the real Meade would have been. But you say that Meade is the Rodney Dangerfield of Civil War generals. He gets no respect.
Exactly.
What a great line that is.
That is my line. I want to point out because I see people on Facebook saying, "Oh, like I say all the time, Meade is the Rodney Dangerfield of Civil War." I said, that's my line.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people just don't know where they get ideas.
Oh yeah.
But so Rodney Dangerfield of the Civil War, why do you say it that way? I know why you say it that way. The audience probably knows why, but tell us why.
Well, when I was writing the book, and as you did point out, the pendulum of reputation seems to be swinging the other way now. And there have been some good books about him. Kent Masterson Brown's wonderful book, Meade at Gettysburg, that came out, was that last year?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, time does fly.
It does.
John Selby did a nice book about Meade, I think mostly Meade in Command, I believe it was called. So people are starting to pay attention, but I started this book with the idea that it would come out on the 150th anniversary of the battle. Mm-hmm. I was always worried as I was working on it that someone else was going to come out with a book about Meade and beat me to the punch.
Yeah. And
I thought it's inevitable because, 150th anniversary, great marketing tool, and it never happened.
Right.
And I think that says something about
why. What do you think it says? Why do you think that is?
People didn't think he was important.
I never understood that. Like, how do you win the Battle of Gettysburg and not be important?
That's a good question.
How are you forgotten? You go into, and we've talked about it on the show too, many of the reasons why Meade might have been forgotten, or at least if not forgotten, kind of sort of forgotten. And it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's hard to believe that the guy who won the most talked about battle of the Civil War was basically nameless and faceless.
I recall watching a PBS program about Robert E. Lee, who is not forgotten in any way, shape, or form.
No, celebrated.
And they discussed the Battle of Gettysburg, and Meade's name was never even mentioned. And he's the man who beat Robert E. Lee at Gettysburg.
It's astounding to me, really.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, but okay, whatever.
But it's kind of a perfect storm of things. One is Meade died while he was still in the Army. He hadn't written his memoirs. He hadn't gotten his version out. Whether he ever would have done that is somewhat doubtful. I don't see him as the kind of the memoir writing.
Right, he's not
person.
really a out there kind of guy. Like, he's not a glory hound, in other words.
But, Grant wrote his memoirs, which are celebrated. Sherman wrote his memoirs. So that I think that might be a factor. But also, even while Meade was still alive, people like Dan Sickles were tearing down his reputation and helping create the story that almost that Gettysburg was won in spite of Meade. He was, the whole story, he was going to retreat only because Sickles forced the issue by moving the Third Corps forward. Was Meade forced to fight at Gettysburg, which is nonsense. And unlike Meade, Sickles lived for a very long time. He died in his 90s. You know, they say only the good die young, and I think Sickles proves the opposite. So that story of Gettysburg was pretty common. That Meade was a mediocre commander. It was really his corps commanders who won the battle for him. Or conversely, Meade didn't win the battle. You know, Lee lost the battle. You know, that approach to it.
Right. It was Lee's battle to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all the Army of the Potomac had to do was step back and watch, you know, Lee blunder his way to a defeat.
I think, like, I was just thinking this through. It's like throughout my life, from, you know, childhood on, when in a group situation, there's always been, you know, there's always the quiet, unassuming type. And maybe he'll be mocked, or, you know, in one ways or another, the more obnoxious guys are going to make it hard for him to exist.
The Phil Sheridan types.
Yeah. Or the Matt types at that age. But but very quickly, around like middle school age, I started to learn that those guys actually were the ones who had it. Like they had the right stuff, whatever that might have been. In fact, I'm thinking of one kid who was quiet all through school, and he was kind of like, I remember one time in third grade, he had a really big sneeze, and I've never seen so much snot before in my life, but it was all, and he didn't cover his mouth or anything, so it went, and it went just hanging. I mean, and we were all like, what the hell? Middle of class, he did that, and of course we didn't let him live it down for the rest of that year. And it followed him for a few years. And but he went on after high school. We all went to college, or, you know, whatever, and he went into the Marine Corps. And we were like, what? The guy never spoke two words. He was kind of pudgy. He wasn't very aggressive or anything. He went into the Marines.
I hope the Marines issued him a handkerchief. But
it was an Army T-shirt.
That would make sense.
Yeah. But no, I mean, but so, like, out of all of us loudmouths, he was the guy who actually had metal. Yeah. You know, he was the guy who was made of something. We were all just kind of you know, goofing off through life. Well,
you know, if you're looking at a Civil War context, like Joe Hooker is the kind of guy who's selling himself, and he's an intriguer, and he's ambitious, and he wants to be in command. And Meade, you know, was not an intriguer. He almost had a naive approach, I think you could say, that if he did his duty and he did it well, and performed capably, he would get noticed.
Yeah. And do you think, was he an honest guy?
Yes, I believe he was a very honest guy.
So he was naive in the sense that he thought that everybody was as honest as he was.
I think he could see through people. I mean, he definitely, you know, learned to dislike Joe Hooker. Yeah, you know, he did not like Daniel Butterfield, his one-time chief of staff, who intrigued against him. I mean, I think he could see where other people were perhaps not as noble as he wished they could be, but he thought if he performed well, and you know, honors would come to him rather than being forced to pursue honors. And I think he was very disappointed when that did not happen. You know, in fact, even within a year of Gettysburg, he said to his wife, I suppose after a while it will be discovered I was not at Gettysburg at all.
Yeah, yeah.
He could see that happening.
What a horrible feeling that is, though.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, especially, I would imagine, because I've never done it, but, you know, commanding an army at a horrendous battle, you know, just the mental, physical, and emotional anguish that inflicts on you, not to mention all the battles you were in before, and the ones you'll be in since. But, like, it takes such a toll on you. And not that, you know, he's a glory hound, but you still want to at least be known as the guy who commanded the army. And here you are predicting you're going to be forgotten. And basically for a long time, he essentially was.
Well, in 1864, he arrived in Washington for, you know, it was during the winter, and heard that he was being denounced on the floor, I think, on the Senate.
Yeah.
You know, as wanting to have because he allegedly wanted to retreat from Gettysburg. It was the sickle story that was being spread. And, that is going to be demoralizing. He had won the battle at Gettysburg. Henry Halleck.
Listen to the rest of this interview and dozens like it. Support the show and get early access to special episodes, early and discounted ticket sales, and more. The second lieutenant level and above gets access to all monthly Patreon episodes. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, choose a tier, and join. And I thank you in advance.